now we are walking on a trajectory. Sihambe Shozin. Here, KwaZulu Natal, this is a slaughtery province. This level must be nullified. Tusi from Inanda, bye.
Good morning, Cathy. The shortages of water delivery is a national crisis, especially in my community where I stay, in Bushbuck Regional Trust. The water will be running once in a week, When the water is running in that day, you must make sure that you fill up your mini buckets, your buckets. If you are lucky to have a Jojo tank, you must fill it up, to make sure that you have a water that will sustain you for a week until the water will be running again, I think the government must solve this problem as soon as possible because the elections are around the corner, People might boycott voting because of poor water delivery. My name is Kugsa from Bushbuckridge. I'm tuning in on 105.6 FM.
This is Cathy. This is John in Bloemfontein. I was listening to the whole water story on some other radio station. This is Cathy. I'm worried. The ANC, when they come with their manifesto, what are they going to talk about? When they try and convince us to vote for them, what are they going to talk about? I feel sorry for all these ANC people who always come and defend this party. ESCOM is dead. Water is bad. Transnet is bad. Police stations are bad. Crime is high. Hospitals are bad. Everything is just literally bad. The only thing they try and do well is to pay SASSA grants, which is our money in any case. It's not their money. What are they going to convince us with? What are they going to say for us to vote for them? Aye, man. They must take a break for 15 years. Aye, they've done enough. Yo.
Good morning, Cathy. Cathy, if the authorities are aware of those gangsters on that road or any other place, the other day was Table Mountain as well, whereby tourists have been robbed. That is the lifeline of many of our people. The tourists provide jobs, provide bread on the table. Now, if the authorities are aware of this, why don't they act? They are good of just letting us know what we already know. I fail to understand why are criminals allowed to do this? Police, why are they allowed to do this? Why can't the president fire Becky Chile and put somebody Why is this guy so long there? And it's almost like, what does he have on the president that he can stay there forever? Not delivering in any other country, he would have been fired long time ago. This is hurting businesses. This is hurting livelihoods. ANC voters, this is what you voted for.
Hey, good morning, Cathy. This is Nhlanhla here. Good morning to your team as well. Cathy, your subject about crime is very touching, my sister. But as long as we do not have leadership in this country, the status quo will remain. And as long as the victims are not taken care of in this country, as long as we are still prioritizing the offenders, nothing is going to happen. So what you're saying is not only between Gauteng and Sun City, it's here in KZN, it's all over, and it's sad because we are crying that the government is failing to create employment. But when there's a little bit of employment that has been created, we are doing this. Thank you, Cathy.
#SAFM Talking Point.
Well, let me welcome onto the show the Minister for Water and Sanitation, Senzo Mchunu. Yesterday, he, of course, released the drop reports, that is the blue drop, the green drop, and the no drop, all of it assessing the water quality, water infrastructure, and waste management infrastructure, at least the state that the systems are in and where the room for improvement is. Minister Mchunu, Mngunu, good morning to you. Thank you for your time on the Talking Point this morning.
Good morning to you, and good morning to the listeners.
When one goes through the statement which you released yesterday and the various findings from this report, which was conducted in the 2021-22 financial year, that's when this audit effectively took place, and it reflects things at that period in our country. It looks to me that across the board, we are seeing a regression, and we'll get into the details more specifically as we continue with the conversation. But overall, the country has moved back when it comes to supply of quality drinking water, management of water as a resource, and waste management.
Yes, it's a very concerning situation, Cathy. Sitting here, I'm very concerned, on one hand, that we seem to have declined. In fact, not seem, in terms of data we've collected, which we've collected from all 144 water service authorities, in terms of assessment. It's quite reliable information and scientific information. So it's factually quite concerning. But at the same time, we're happy that we have resuscitated this program so that we know exactly where we are. But it's not a question of just knowing where you are. It's getting your compass correctly to say, from here, this is where we should go. And the challenge here, which I don't want to take too much of your time talking about, is just that as DWS, we don't work alone on this matter. The legislation provides that certain municipalities, and in this instance, 144, are designated as water service authorities, and therefore they are an important stakeholder in the sense that the water that you drink in your home, that you shower with in your home, comes from municipalities, one municipality or the other throughout the Republic. Now, that means that it brings into play a very key role player, not just a researcher or any other important role player, but very essential, very critical role player. But there's a different sphere. Now, it wasn't anticipated that they would decline in their capacity to do this service, which has been happening for quite some time, and we took time to observe and note that in fact they are declining. And if we don't intervene and change fundamentally this situation, we're going to go under the bus via municipalities that are declining generally in terms of their capacity to provide service delivery, not just water alone. Now, we have said, because we're concerned, but our job, no minister is appointed to lament for the whole period. You are appointed to change things around for the better for the citizens of the country, and therefore we have taken that kind of path that let us now change the situation, because we can't note beyond this. There's nothing that we'll be looking for that we don't have at the moment. It can only be a worsening situation collecting data. We now want to usher in a new dispensation altogether and correct things and bring them to where they belong. So the release has helped us on one hand. Had it not been stopped in 2014, I sit here thinking that if it had been released as it was supposed to be every year after that, surely municipalities and department would have noted the decline within the shortest possible time after 2014 and would have taken note and taken measures. But nevertheless, we only resuscitated this when it came in 2021. Now it is time then to act in accordance with what has been released and is before us and the public.
So one of the questions that we have to ask, Minister, is when we look at the figures, and I'm just going to start off with the Blue Drop report, which really examines the quality of drinking water, right? 46% of water was found to be poor or not microbiologically safe to drink. So rounded off, that would be 50% of the water in this country. And much of that water is sitting not in metropolitan municipalities, but in municipalities that are a grade below metro. So every other municipality would be sitting sort of with the bulk of this finding. Now, in that same period, there hasn't necessarily been the withdrawal of grants to manage water systems. The funding that government has been given to maintain that infrastructure has still been going out. So is it right then to assume that monies that have gone out in service of, or rather to procure these services, has simply not done that?
Yes, if you observe, as we have done, to say, let's look at WISIC, which is water infrastructure in municipalities, and we look at ARBIC, which is a regional bulk provided for as grants, and you add MIG, and in urban areas, metros, you add the human settlement funding. And then you take it back a year, up to 5 years. Indeed, you remain with a situation that says you have to question something here. This is in terms of grants. You walk and say, what did you do with this money? Yes, this, you see what you get pointed at, but it often doesn't tally with the amount, at least at face value. And when you check, you remain with questions. So you are right. But we've got to do this because part of this, and I'm going to qualify, we've got to continue granting municipalities because, as you see, some of the municipalities are doing very, very well, but some are not doing well. And some are really, like in the Northern Cape, they are doing very badly. Now, we have to intervene instead because we can't cut. Remember, water is a human rights commodity, and it's a right for them to have. So we will be deemed to have cut a lifeline because water is life. And therefore, what we rather have to zoom into is accountability, full accountability in terms of what use are these grants put into. But we don't have to wait for them to spend or misspend or fail to spend, because there's that element as well. The municipalities roll back quite remarkable amounts of money back to treasury due to failure to spend, which means that there's poor capacity in municipalities to plan projects of water and then implement and then provide water. Now, what's the solution? Because sitting here, I can't just sit and explain problems throughout the term and lament. What we have come to conclude is the following: one, that municipalities can only decline further and fail further in terms of providing water, except in some instances, as you see in Gauteng and in the Western Cape. But general, that's the case. And therefore, time to usher in a new era where you say you will continue in terms of the constitution and legislation to be a water service authority. But in terms of actual provision, you need to appoint somebody else, an entity that will be professional, an entity that will have proven managerial skills in water, an entity that will take full accountability in terms of billing, monitoring, provision, and even collecting, and take that money and plant it back to the water services.
Sure.
Yes.
Sorry to come in there, Minister, but surely
Yes.
Part of the problem that we know in terms
Yes.
of how municipalities function and some of the corruption that has gone in is that even when there is work that needs, where procurement needs to happen, much of that is
Yes.
is ending up in the hands of friends, family members. The networks of patronage are endless. And so when you say that you now want to take that responsibility, give it to an independent service provider who effectively will have to run the service, isn't that just, changing the pair of hands that is going to benefit? Because the key thing here is that as long as there isn't a clear chain of accountability, then the levels of corruption that have led to the situation is going to continue to take place. And the reason I say corruption is that even while in front of me, I might not be sitting with example of, specifics of the corruption. We know that more broadly, part of what is leading to a failure of municipalities not being able to provide services is because there's corruption and there is no accountability. So isn't that a place to begin? That you as the department have to ask, well, in 10 years, if in 2014, 5% of water supply systems achieved poor or had bad microbiological water quality, when that number sits at 46% now, it's more than tripled. That means that there are things that have gone terribly wrong in the system, but we can't just move on from the money that has been spent and cut our losses. Those very same individuals might still be in those municipalities. They could well still be running some of these projects.
Yes, that's your points are pointing to the situation that is that warrants clear attention. But there's a sting in what we are saying in terms of dividing or separating a service provider from a water service authority. The sting is we will issue a license, as TWS, to a service provider and say, we're issuing you the license, and this is the level of performance that is expected of you in all respects. And when you deviate just on one criteria or on one regulation, it's a threat to your having a license. We can withdraw a license directly and at a time when we think that this service provider is now taking things the other way, and we withdraw. And that will include, corruption has signs. It becomes very clear right from day one that something is setting in there. It doesn't take long. Now, that is going to give us much more leverage as a responsible department so that ordinary people out there who are asking the question, where is the Department of Water and Sanitation? Others go on to say, where is the minister? If those who know me by name, they will also call me by name when because of desperation there. Now, in order for us, late as it may be, but when you have a job to do, you don't say it is late and therefore I might as well go sleep. You've got to look at the situation, tackle it. It happens even in the private companies. You will have a private company declining over time, and then they change management. When a new management comes in, they must study, they must look at the causes of deterioration. They must then take the thing up. You often hear, no, that company has been turned around. It's because of people coming in and saying it can't be like yesterday. We're going to change things. So the sting is going to be in this thing. Once we see corruption setting in, there will be signs, and we'll take action on the spot, and we'll say, and coming with Section 63, which is very important.
Minister,
yes.
I'm going to give you an opportunity to continue. It's 10:30. We're in conversation with with the Minister for Water and Sanitation, Senzo Mchunu.
Thank you.
And in the headlines, a family in Kathu in the Northern Cape says it is devastated after 6 of their relatives burned to death in their home at the weekend. Among those who died in the fire were 4 one-year-old boys. In other news, mourners and families of mine workers are gathered at Impala Shaft 2 in Rustenburg, Northwest, for the memorial service of the mine work. In an accident last week, 13 mine workers died on the scene after a rope connected to a personal lift snapped. And the EFF is expected back in the Western Cape High Court after Parliament's Powers and Privileges Committee said it's not ready to subpoena National Assembly Speaker Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula to testify during the hearing of its 13 MPs next week. More on these and other stories at the top of the hour.
Taking a look at your markets this morning, the rand is currently trading at 18 rand 91 to the dollar, 23 rand 83 to the pound, and 20 rand 40 to the euro. Markets in Asia ended firmer. The JC is higher in mid-morning trade. Markets in Europe are also up this hour. Gold is trading at $2,032, platinum $901 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $77.35 a barrel.
So Sharon at office was telling me the way drip is so expensive these days. She's now waiting for her old clothes to come back into fashion. I said, Joza, while you're waiting, why not let your money do the things in a Nedbank Just Invest account where you can get your money after 24 hours notice? Oganchani voiceman.
Injalo, Mabel. Earn up to 9% interest. Anyone can open an investment account via the Money app in under 2 minutes. See money differently. Nedbank. We're a licensed FSP and registered credit provider. T's and C's on the interest rates apply.
Eintracht Frankfurt plans to have things their way when they clash with the giants of German football Bayern München. They believe a win is more exciting on home ground, while the Bavarians are gunning for strictly 3 points to settle at the top of the table. This is the Bundesliga, football as it's meant to be. Catch the superb contest between Eintracht Frankfurt and Bayern München on Saturday 9 December at 3 p.m. live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Get your payments done with the utmost security and convenience when you purchase a TV license now. With our new secure payment systems with a one-time PIN, OTP feature, and the choice of receiving your OTP via SMS or email, you can ensure prompt and secure payments. The additional use of capture will protect you against spam and automated data attractions. With TV licenses, you can enjoy watching all your favorite shows or movies that matter to you. Get yours today. Visit www.tvlic.co.za.
Brighton and Hove Albion are going all out to brighten their clash against Burnley FC with maximum points.
At Digmer again, that was a masterpiece.
However, Burnley FC will display a sense of urgency to move up from the relegation zone.
Dariola has scored! Down the middle! Burnley lead! Shane Rodriguez!
Who will have a great day on the field of play? The Seagulls or the Clarids? This is the Premier League. Catch the exciting clash between Brighton and Hove Albion and Burnley FC on Saturday 9 December at 4 p.m. live on S3. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
You're listening to The Talking Point. We're in conversation with Senzo Mngunu, the Minister for Water and Sanitation, and it's on the back of the release of the DROP reports that look into the state of water quality and water infrastructure and waste management across the country. And the bad news, of course, is the fact that there's been a regression across the board. Minister Mngunu, you talked about the fact that there are ways in which the department wants to bring in accountability mechanisms to the point where you now want to allow for, in legislation, for the outsourcing of outsourcing of water supply and the management, really, of water and waste management in municipalities to independent service providers. So, and you'll have to forgive me here. The minute you say that, I have alarm bells going off in my head, because I think, well, what is the track record that we have with service providers more generally that render services? Let's, for the purposes of this conversation, stick to municipalities. And the reason why municipalities in this country perform, at least a lot of them, as poorly as they do, is because of the outsourcing of services that they should be rendering. So when you say you will be giving out these licenses and there will be expectations on these service providers, does that come with being able to recover monies that have been spent on projects where there has been no delivery?
Firstly, I must qualify what we actually mean. As the water service authorities will be able to appoint a water board, for instance. It's just not outsourcing to independent in the normal sense of the word, but of course independent of themselves. But it can be a water board, which is an SOE, and there's no SOE that would want their name to be dented. Let me take Rand Water, which is registered.
Minister, there are many SOEs whose names are dented, and they don't seem to be bothered by that at all. They continue to bleed billions of rand, and the status quo remains the same.
But not boards so far. One board that was giving us a little bit of trouble was Citibank, and we didn't just disestablish. We didn't just dissolve. We disestablished that board. It's no longer there, and we are fighting corruption with all engines. So I'm talking about something that is practical that we're facing. A water board can be appointed as a water service provider by a municipality that is designated as a water service authority, a service provider, or a municipality that is doing well next door, or an NGO with a track record whose profile will satisfy us that we can give them a license because of their standing in terms of accountability and so on. It won't just be blind appointment and a free ride. It will have a lot of attachments and of course a private sector company. And as I say, subject to scrutiny and everything and monitoring. But what we're fighting here is to say, let's not keep on talking about the same thing that we're hoping for a turnaround in this municipality year after year when none is coming, as the records show, from 5% to now 46%. So let us intervene. Let us do something that will change, and not for the sake of changing, but thoroughly, we have thoroughly applied our minds, and we are saying this is the way forward as far as this, apart from an enabling review of legislation. Section 63 empowers the minister to intervene directly in answer to the question, what are you doing when this municipality is like failing to provide water and sanitation services? Now, currently we get hamstrung by Section 139, which can only be imposed by a provincial government to a municipality so that we can invoke it and apply and intervene directly. Now, we are then reviewing that legislation so that we have full authority using 63, but want it separated in terms of implementation, separated from 139. That will enable us to account fully to every citizen in any municipality, because water that you drink in your home comes from a municipality, of one municipality or the other. It doesn't come directly from us, but it doesn't allow us to shirk our overall responsibility as a department of water and sanitation. But we want to have effective capacity to act legislatively and so on that.
Yeah.
So I can tell you, sitting here, that had we implemented these things like 2015-16, we would be far from what you are seeing. But
look,
we're not going to give up. We are not going to lament. We are just acting to turn the situation. I can assure you that the next report will be better than this one.
The reality is that the damage has been done, Minister, and in fact, it's now cost us years, even including, the aspect of infrastructure. Because when we look at how much water, this is non-revenue water that municipalities are losing, and non-revenue, of course, becomes water that citizens don't actually pay for. It's lost, so it has to be written off the books. That is speaking to operational and capacity problems in municipalities, because there's simply no maintenance or not enough maintenance that is taking place in order to manage that figure. But I think when we look at interventions of the department, when we look more broadly at what has the national department's interventions previously yielded, where have the results previously come from? Where you've had problems with service providers, some of those problems to date still remain. And one can just think of the Giyani Water Project, where 3.5 billion rand has been spent so far. And residents of Giyani still don't have water in their taps. And while it's great to have commitments from you about the fact that things will change, the reality is that if there's no water in the taps, that means that there is a systemic failure that allows the situation to be what it is.
Yes, but not where we have intervened. The example you are using is a very good one. We have never been at a situation where, like we are in now, where you have a fixed sealed main pipeline from Nandoni to Giyani with fresh water, with raw water running throughout up to Ntsame Dam. It is the first time that, ever since we started talking about Giyani a long time ago, it's the first time that you have such a situation. That is change. Number two, we are upgrading a plant there, the water treatment plant, because they will be receiving raw water. That plant, in terms of its refurbishment, is now above 67%, so that it is able to have the capacity that is required by all the 55 villages. Now, that is change number two. Number three change, you have 37 contractors that are on the ground reticulating. Yes, water may not be coming out of taps as yet, but trenches have been dug and are being dug, and pipes are being laid in those trenches. And in fact, the most of those villages, the 24 out of 55, they will be getting water by end of the year. as a result of this intervention, which is effective, which is changed. It might be late, but it has come.
When is
Then
end of the year? When is end of the year? We're on
it's this year.
We're on the 6th of December now. So there's a final
Yes,
month of the year. So when is end of the year?
this year, 2023, because
Yes, Minister,
some
but
of
it's
these
December.
companies.
So what is the switch on date that you've agreed to?
No, we have agreed on end of the year. End of the year is this year, end of December. But
So
we're
what
not going
by
to wait for
so what
December.
by the 31st of December they'll have water running?
That is exactly the end of the year, and we have an agreement to that. And I know that some of these contractors were, 2 months ago or so, they were 97%, 96%, others 80, others 70. So we are pushing very hard. Remember, all these things
you've got
are under.
you've gotten a commitment that these contractors are going to work, if need be, until the 31st of December, so that they can switch on water to villages in Guyana.
We were saying, in fact, the true situation is that that plant was always pumping water to some villages there, but it wasn't all because of its capacity. Now we're refurbishing it, and we have said, as we reach higher degrees of refurbishment, let's connect the pipes that are ready. Going to the villages, because some have been completed. So instead of waiting for 100% refurbishment of the plant, just be so. As I'm talking to you, it's not like no one is getting water in Guyana. They are getting water.
So
that
Minister,
is a fact.
Minister,
yes.
I'm talking about the commitment that you say you've made with service providers, that by end of the year, which is the 31st of December,
2023.
Yes, it will be switched on.
Yes. And I'm adding to say,
all right,
it won't be switched off for the first time. It's already it has already been switched on, but we want all 37 to complete their work so that the 24 prioritized.
Okay, all right, Minister. I want to go to Zola out in Bloom. Zola, good morning.
Morning, Cathy. Sawubona Maqingwana.
Kunjani?
Ngiyaphila Maqingwana. Yeah. Cathy, I just want to say the minister that you have there is one of the ministers who are hands-on. I have worked under him and in the water sector. It was for the first time for me to see a minister who attends to the problems, who goes to all the provinces. I think the problem is with us, people who are not giving enough support to the minister and showing commitment. And when it comes to municipalities, they must also come to the party, and we need to give our full support to the minister and his team. I've worked under 3 ministers. I'm now on early retirement. All the others, they will come, but this minister is one who attends to everything. He's in Buffalo City, he's everywhere.
So,
I really
Zola,
appreciate it.
What do you mean by support?
I mean, the employees in the water sector must also come to the party.
Okay.
Commit themselves, and they see the vision and mission of the minister, and I understand the mission and vision of the boards that they serve under.
All right.
Because, yes,
all right,
the minister is always there, and he attends to them. I think I want to qualify by saying he spends sleepless nights thinking about how to get the water sector right. So the employees must play their part.
All right. Okay, Zola. Zola is out in Bloom. Thanks for that call. Sipo, you're in East London. Good morning.
Good morning, Cathy. Cathy, Uzola means the commitment that you can't get the date for the water in Guyana to be turned on by 31st December. Uzola talks about the commitment of the minister in being everywhere. When the minister cannot give you the exact date as to when construction is closing by the 15th, generally in South Africa, and the minister is not telling you that those companies have agreed not to close and they're going to pay them overtime, working extra time until the 31st of December. That's what Zola means. What Zola means that the minister, while knowing that there's a scarcity of technical skills in municipalities, but the National Department does not have a generic list nationally of all experts that are working in water in the country. Uzola simply says the minister does not have a plan to bolster capacity of municipalities by employing a contingent and deploying that contingent to directly in these municipalities. Simply Uzola uthi, minister is the one who's now the agent for privatization of public service. Uzola says, minister uguqule iskipper. He's no longer what we thought he is. Can I thank you, Cathy?
All right, Sipho, a different interpretation of what Zola said. I think Zola might well call back and say that is not what he was implying, but a very clever way of making the point you wanted to bring across on the station this morning.
I actually want to intervene. Minister of Water is not the same as Minister of Local Government. And I think the caller needs to acknowledge that because it's a fact. But what we do, we do ask or approach and give directives to water service boards, to water boards, to intervene in the area of services instead of just confining themselves in the area of bulk provision of treated water, and that I'm talking about is practical, and that is what we are doing. It's not for me to go to a municipality and say appoint competent people. Of course, I can say that on the water side of it, but they still retain absolute power to employ, despite what we say. And what we are saying is that please, you can even reduce as a municipality the number of employees in your water and sanitation department in favor of engineers, at least 2 or 3 engineers in a municipality, so that you can turn things around. But in the meantime, what are we doing? We're not folding our arms. We are moving on. Yeah, and secondly, I've said to the caller, already people in Guyana, there's no situation where people in Guyana have never had water. I mean, there have been boreholes all the time. The small water treatment plant that has been there has always been giving water, but to a limited number of villages. All we are doing is we are refurbishing, and I think he is interpreting it the way he wants. Yeah.
Look, the reality is, Minister, I've been to Guyana and the villages affected by the water situation.
Yes.
And I know exactly how extensive those water shortages have been, even where they're boreholes. Some of them over the years have run dry. To the point where people have to go fetch water from the river. So I don't think we must understate the crisis that it has presented for those residents. You say that part of what you've also what you'll also do is that you'll instruct municipalities where if they need to cut back on the employees they have internally in favor of more professional people that will be brought in to procure services independently. What does that do for costs? The Auditor General year on year is warning us about the issue of cost and consultants and.
Yes. On Friday last week, I was in Skukune as a district municipality, which is a water service authority. And they tell me they've got 285 personnel just on water and sanitation. In that personnel, when I asked for the number of engineers, they talked about 1 person. Now, we are then saying, Mayor, we think that you could have reserved at least the last 5 out of 185 in favor of maybe 2. You take the same budget, but you employ lesser staff than vacancies that are there, and you combine the money that you would have paid to 10 people or so to 3 or 4, but highly qualified people, so that you guarantee a good service. Because very often, like we are doing now. 3 of the engineers have already been sent there because of lack of skill, to beef up capacity, to turn things around in Skukun so that we are able to come back and say to you, this is how we are intervening. This is the impact of our intervention, and it is it is turning things around. This is how we're operating. And we are in different municipalities doing this, but it's not being all over. Yes, it's calculated necessary intervention at that time, and then you monitor from far the implementation thereof.
All right.
And you very well where we've been, we are seeing changes.
Colin, you're in Cape Town. Good morning. Please keep it brief for me, Colin.
Yes, I'll have to. Good morning, and good morning to the Minister. You know the biggest problem this government ever made? Municipalities outsourcing. Why? The old days every municipality had their own workforce. They did the roads, they did the sewage, they did the water, they did this, they had their own engineers. But as soon as this government took over, they came out with outsourcing. I worked for Transnet. They outsourced. They got rid of thousands of qualified top engineers, people. Now they're outsourcing. The outsourcing was a good idea for the ANC to fill up their pockets. Why get rid of all your skilled people that you had in apartheid days that worked for municipalities, your water engineers, your electrical engineers, and all those people? But no, they came with outsourcing.
All
that
right.
was a way of getting rich.
All
Why?
right, Colin. Minister?
It's not as blanket as that. We are saying the municipalities, as water service authorities, have deteriorated. Something needs to be done, and that something is not privatization, as the caller has said. We are saying, and unless he chooses it, we are saying if this municipality is not able to service people in accordance with the demand for water and sanitation, and if you look at them, they have no capacity to turn things around on their own. Appoint a service provider, and that could be a water board. Now, a water board is 100% SOE and so on, and that will turn things around. We've proven that. And Mfuleni and Rand Water are at an advanced stage to do exactly that. That's not privatization.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Minister, as we speak, again, according to this report, about 64% of wastewater treatment works in this country are at risk of discharging partially treated or even untreated water into rivers and the broader environment. This means that the cholera outbreak that we had in Hammanskraal this year, in the last year, could well be seen again because of this high risk. How are you going to prevent more risk of disease to South Africans with the current state of affairs being what it is?
All right. The report that has been released here is progress report. It was released mid-year, and already what we did, we have a memorandum of understanding with local government, wherein we take the 30 of those municipalities that are high risk, that scored less than 10% in their assessment, to say they need intervention, and already those 30 identified as high risk in terms of the watch report. We will take there are already interventions in their wastewater treatment plants. So it is a risk, of course. There is a risk, but we're already doing something to prevent that from getting fully blown as an outright problem, because we've already identified it. There's no way we could sit with it over time and not do anything, so that the risk gets mitigated or gets prevented from becoming a fully blown problem.
Oh, all right. That was the Minister for Water and Sanitation, Senzo Mngunu. We'll have to leave it there with that conversation for today. The one thing that is going to stay with me after this conversation is the Minister may not have said it explicitly, but local government is in such a state of crisis that it has no way currently of fixing itself. And we all have to sit and think about what that means for the provision of basic services.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
Top stories this hour: 6 family members perish in a fire, and Joe Biden links second-term aspirations directly to Trump. Good morning. A family in Kathu in the Northern Cape says it is devastated after 6 of their relatives burned to death in their home at the weekend. Among those who died in the fire are 4 one-year-old boys. The cause of the fire remains unknown, and the Northern Cape Police have since opened an inquest docket. The uncle and brother of the 6 deceased, Lebohang Kosenke, says they are still traumatized by the tragedy.
3 weeks back, we were burying our mom, so we still haven't healed. So what our mom accepted because she was ill, but now this one, it's going to take us time. And the way it happened, as you know, there were kids involved, and as a family also, because of we were heading our own family. So from a family of 10 to a family of 3 in a period of 3 weeks, it's devastating.
Mourners and families of mine workers are gathered at Impala Shaft 2 on the Simunya Hostel Sport Grounds in Rustenburg, Northwest, for the memorial service of 13 mine workers who died in a mine accident last week. 11 of the workers died on the scene after a rope connected to a personal lift snapped. 2 mine workers died in hospital later. Zebulon Maine reports.
Hundreds of mine workers have gathered at the sports ground at Impala Platinum Mine for the memorial service of their former colleagues. 8 of the deceased miners are from Eastern Cape, 3 from Lesotho, 1 each from Rustenburg and Gauteng. Workers can be seen wearing the regalia of their union AMCU. The Deputy Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, Nobuhleng Kabane, mine bosses and union representatives are also in attendance. 50 employees remain in hospital, 8 of them in critical care.
Agnes Sitwanso, who has been charged with the murder of a family member to claim insurance money, is expected to appear in the Moloto Magistrates Court in Mahikeng in the Northwest for bail application. Sitwanso is also facing charges of fraud and defeating the ends of justice after she was arrested last month during an intelligence-driven operation. The investigating officer is expected to take the stand to give evidence on why bail must not be granted. The EFF is expected back in the Western Cape High Court. This after Parliament's Powers and Privileges Committee said it's not ready to subpoena National Assembly Speaker Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula to testify during the hearing of the party's 13 MPs next week. EFF's lawyers gave Parliament until the end of business yesterday to respond, or they returned to court for the matter to be heard. The 13 affected MPs are facing charges of gross disturbance after they were removed during President Cyril Ramaphosa's budget vote in June last year, and also during his oral reply session in August last year. Mercedes Besant has more.
The EFF lawyers will now be back in court this afternoon for a full hearing to ask the court to force Parliament to subpoena the Speaker. Meanwhile, the National Assembly has approved the committee report yesterday, which proposed sanctions against 6 other EFF MPs, including Julius Malema. The 6 will be suspended from Parliament without pay in February next year, but the EFF lawyers already indicated that they will be back in court in January if the Assembly approved the sanctions against the 6 MPs.
And finally, U.S. President Joe Biden has indicated that part of his motivation to run for a second term next year is to oppose Donald Trump's attempts to return to the White House. The Democrats' president said if his Republican rival wasn't running, he wasn't sure he would be either. The BBC's Peter Bowes reports.
This is the first time Joe Biden has pinned his aspirations for a second term so directly on the ambitions of the former president. If Trump wasn't running, I'm not sure I'd be running, he said. We cannot let him win, saying he thought democracy was at risk should Donald Trump be re-elected. Mr. Biden's remarks come as some opinion polls suggest he's trailing behind Mr. Trump in what is still a hypothetical race between the two in next year's presidential election.
Recapping the story this hour, a family in the Northern Cape says it is devastated after 6 of their relatives burned to death in their home at the weekend. Among those who died in the fire are 4 one-year-old boys. Mudupi Makhalemela will bring you the headlines at the bottom of the hour. For SAFM News, I'm Nomalizo Mandela.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide. Leading the conversation.
What was that sound? Was it a life support machine in an ICU ward? Was it a car reversing for the driver to take another look at a woman he saw at the bar last night? Or was it the birth of a new robot machine about to change the world? This time, you decide. It's your story. The award-winning SAFM Playwriting Competition is back. SAFM invites all writers to explore the medium of sound, the theater of the mind, and to create a 1-hour radio play in English. Get writing now and submit your play before the 22nd of January 2024 for a chance to win one of 3 large cash prizes. For more information, visit safm.co.za.
Mamelodi Sundowns and Egyptian outfit Pyramids FC have collected maximum points in their Group A opening matches. They now tackle each other in search of victory. Masandawana want to ensure their visitors walk away without any joy, but Pyramids FC are confident they will upset the 2016 champs. This is the CAF Champions League. Roerkop battles it out with East Cairo. Experience the African flavor of the beautiful game. Mamelodi Sundowns FC versus Pyramids FC on Sunday 10 December at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 and SABC 1. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
Morning, Cathy and the Minister. This is Magdalene from Bloem. Cathy, honestly speaking, service providers are not the one who bring failure in rendering the services. Supply chain officials from municipality up to the minister level are the ones who are affecting services to be provided, because they earmark the service provider who's going to loot for them and for ANC in order for ANC to secure its position financially. So service providers who knows how to do their job are sidelined. That's the whole thing. Magdalene from them, thank you.
Hi, Cathy. I hope you are well. I'd like to remain anonymous. Cathy, the one thing I keep on raising that is a problem with municipalities, mayors are political heads. They shouldn't be administrators of the municipality. And these people are directly involved with the running of municipalities, and they influence who gets hired as manager and whatnot and whatnot. You can't have infrastructure running on the same timeline as political timelines. Political timelines is a 5-year time frame, and infrastructure you are generally looking between 20 and 60 years. So you need something more permanent and someone more academic and has experience to run these things.
I get this argument, listening to you talking with the minister there. It is so painful because in Guyana, Malamlele. We don't have water. Like my village, I'm from Kobani village. Since from 1991, we didn't have water. Even today, it's day zero every day. Then they put pipes from Nandoni Dam. They take it to Guyana. While we as Malamlele people, those pipes, they just pass there, go to Guyana straight. Even those people in Guyana, they are not yet to get that water. So sometimes this corruption of this official, it is so painful. Good day, this Kimatebola.
Morning, Cathy, and SAFM listeners. Well, Cathy, you've always been calling minister after minister of the ANC and mayor after mayor of the ANC. And unfortunately, the ANC will always be ruling this country through speeches and speeches and speeches and endless speeches. The ANC has nothing new to offer this country. They are always defensive. In fact, we just need to vote them out, period.
Cathy, you need to hold this minister accountable. You're asking him questions and he's not giving you answers. I think that in itself is an example of why our water system is the way that it is. Kate from Durban.
Good morning, Cathy. This is Faith. Please ask the minister to attend to Lesserton in Queenstown. We have not had running water from taps and tanks since the local government elections. The councillors took out the taps, so we have to buy water, which is unfair. We are indigent. And it just is not proper. We are not getting joy. I reported personally to the ANC office, the chairperson, nothing has happened. Instead, we have to go and buy water, or that's it. Thank you. Please, it's very, very urgent. Lesserton in Queenstown.
Morning, Auskethy. Morning to the minister. Auskethy, the Guyana water project, Auskethy. Whatever is happening in Hammanskraal water project, we don't know. The previous minister, we don't know where she ended, what was happening there. This minister, the current minister, with respect, we don't know if he's coming back next year. It is a problem because they shuffle these ministers like nobody's business. And then at the end of the day, the president doesn't want us to rate to see how they were rated, these ministers. So it's just a problem.
Good afternoon or good morning, Cathy, and good morning to the minister there. You know, Cathy, I've just listened to the minister now as he's speaking, saying that municipalities might have to change and actually get service providers, but then there will still be the mother body. But so what is the need for a municipality, and why do we have to keep paying rates and taxes to municipality if the water is going to be outsourced to another company like Randburg or so? And what does that mean? Does that mean that all the municipalities are failing? And what does it mean for the government and him as the minister that everything will need to be outsourced at an extra cost? And what is it that this government of ours is actually doing right? Because I there is sense for everything is going to be outsourced to everyone and everyone. How? We need the capable state, but
Cathy Mohlahlana on SAFM.
It's the celebration of the century, and you're invited. We've already given away almost 3 million rand with 56 daily vouchers won. Buy a new Ford before 31 December, and you could win a 50,000 rand voucher or the grand prize of us paying for your new Ford. Visit your nearest Ford dealer today. T&Cs apply.
Sekhukhune United target a win in their own backyard against Stade Malien FC. Meanwhile, the Malian side refused to travel back home empty-handed. This is the CAF Confederation Cup Group D clash. Catch Sekhukhune United versus Stade Malien FC on Sunday 10 December at 8:30 p.m. live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
the 16 Days of Activism for No Violence Against Women and Children campaign. This year, be an activist. Play your part. Do not protect abusers. Report them. Hashtag no to GBVF.
SAFM leading the conversation.
Polokwane City want to test if Kaizer Chiefs can handle the Limpopo heat. Their plan is to get a comfortable position in the top half. But the Kosi Nation is in a good mood to collect maximum points away from home. Rise and Shine versus Rise Kosi Rise. This is the DSTV Premiership. Polokwane City versus Kaizer Chiefs on Saturday, 9 December at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC1 and SABC radio stations. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
All right, let's get straight into our final conversation for the morning. Professor Shingai Mutambira is the head of the Urology Department at the Sefako Makgato Health Sciences University. He's also founder of the Prostate Cancer Foundation South Africa. And today, of course, we're talking about urinary incontinence. Professor Mutambira, good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
My absolute pleasure, and morning to you, Cathy, and your listeners as well.
This is often a not comfortable conversation to have because it is one of those things that makes people feel quite embarrassed about speaking about. And a lot of people just simply suffer in silence and not understanding that they don't have to just live with the condition without finding out what other possibilities and avenues for a therapy that might be available.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think when we're talking about incontinence, it's actually a word which was based on an old French thing, which means without restraint. And for our purposes, any fluid that comes out of the body without you wanting to have come out is incontinence. And the two most common versions of this, and by far the most common, are fecal incontinence, where you soil yourself with your feces, but far more common than that is urine incontinence, where we wet ourselves when we didn't want to be socially wet. And I think when we look at it, there are other areas in the body, like even the mouth and ears and things, which can have fluids that come out, but these are by far the most common. And again, for our purposes, there are essentially only about 5 different types of urine incontinence that we like to define. One is what we call urge incontinence, where you feel the need to go to the toilet, but before you reach the bathroom, you wet yourself. The second is what we call stress incontinence, which is not about being stressed, but when you cough or sneeze and you increase the pressure inside your abdomen, it involuntarily leaks. The third one is where if your bladder doesn't empty properly, like for example, if your prostate is blocked up and you're not able to pass urine, and then it overflows because of pressure inside the bladder, that's called overflow incontinence. And then the fourth one is what we call total incontinence, where you're just wet all the time, and that can be from, like, for example, if you've had an injury to your bladder or to the pipe for passing urine, the pipes that are coming from your kidneys, which then empty into the vagina or even in the rectum for guys, which then can cause you incontinence. And although it's not usually defined as real incontinence, you must remember that bedwetting is a form of incontinence as well. And all of them have slightly different causes, and all of them have slightly different treatments, but they're extremely common.
And you bring me to my next question. So because we are perhaps beginning the conversation off more broadly, if we can talk about what are the causes behind some of the different types of incontinence that you've just outlined.
Oh, yeah. The urgency incontinence is probably the most common one especially for females, and it's but guys also do get it very commonly. And for our purposes, again, there's only about 3 reasons why people will feel like they have to rush to the toilet and don't make it there. One would be if there was a problem with the nerves to the bladder, like for example, if your person has a problem with like a paraplegia. That can cause one of those things as well. The second is if there's something inside the bladder that's irritating the bladder, like for example, if it's a bladder infection, but usually you'll have other symptoms besides just the rushing, like burning in the urine. And bladder infection is extremely common. Almost every woman will get a bladder infection at some stage in her life, and that can cause the same feeling of rushing to the toilet. But by far the most common is what we of this urge incontinence is what we call idiopathic, which means that we really don't understand exactly why the person has it. It's not as an idiot. It's just we're the idiots that we don't really understand. But we suspect it's something to do with the bladder muscles or the ions going through the muscles that are just making the bladder overwork itself, and that. As I said, probably around anywhere between 40 and 50% of women and men have this, and most of the time it's relatively easy to treat. We might get back onto that a little bit later. When it comes to stress incontinence, which is when you cough and sneeze and you wet yourself, again, it's unfortunately it's more common in females, and it's mainly for our purposes again based on the muscle there's a muscle just below the bladder, which is not the same muscle that's used for the urge incontinence, but it's one that we call the pelvic diaphragm, which is also it helps to keep the bladder up, keeps the womb up, keeps the rectum up, it keeps the prostate up in men. And if that muscle gets weakened, it can, when you cough and sneeze, the pressure then lets the urine come out when you're involuntary, you're increasing the abdominal pressure. And again, why females it's more common is mainly because the vagina is an extra area there which can be open, but also because of bearing children, and it doesn't really matter whether you give a vaginal delivery or a cesarean, you can still get the same problem. And again, there are various treatments for that. When it comes to overflow, the commonest ones are again probably prostate in men, and that happens when we give the prostate, which is sitting just below the bladder around the pipe passing here, and it gets bigger after the age of 40, and it can block up the area, get overflow. Not that common, but it does happen. And then the total incontinence, it's usually either from two main things. It's almost always in females, and males are slightly different. In females, it's often because of an injury, like for example, if they had a bit of a damage to the bladder when they were having a cesarean section, or if they're having a hysterectomy, and also cervical cancer. And just to punt, please remember, everybody, HPV vaccination is out there. It can eradicate cervical cancer. It's one of the biggest killer cancers in our country. Let's consider that. And then the last one, the bedwetting or enuresis, is based on a chemical which is produced in the brain at night. Basically, what happens is a chemical called the ADH, or antidiuretic hormone, which is produced at night to decrease the amount of urine that's made by the kidneys. It also decreases the amount of fluid that comes from your mouth and your sweating and that sort of thing. And we know that if it's low, you can then get this inability to wake up in time to go and urinate.
So effectively what you're saying, Professor Mutambiro, is that when we look at bedwetting, we shouldn't just see it as just that. It is an actual health condition that can be treated.
Oh yeah, I think what people when we look at it statistically, the average female will be potty trained faster than males. But once a child reaches around the age of 4 for a female, then about 6 for a guy, and they're still bedwetting, it is a problem, because it means that there probably is a problem with this chemical, because we know that 70-80% of children who have bedwetting, it's a genetic thing. It's actually been inherited by from their parents. And of course, there are cultural and other things. For example, if you go to Cambodia, because there's no diapers in some of the rural areas, they actually are potty trained within 6 months. But that's, even some of them will still have this congenital thing. And then we must consider the treatments. And there are treatments which we replenish this ADH medication, but there are also things like bladder training, which is important for all types of urinary incontinence, where we actually can do things like timing and giving alarms to prevent them from having a problem. So it's not a simple thing, and it also can unfortunately, when you have one type of incontinence, you're far more likely to get other types of urine incontinence as well, and also fecal incontinence is closely related to all of these urinary incontinences. So if it's bothersome and it's giving a patient a problem, and just as provide a side thing for adults, we know that there's something called nocturia, which is waking up too many times at night to pass urine, is related also to the same ADH chemical. And it's very common. Up to 60-70% of people over the age of 50 are waking up more than 2 times at night, and it's actually interfering with their sleep. Again, there are treatments for that as well, and don't consider it normal just because you're aging that you're more likely to wake up a lot at night and possibly wet your bed at night.
Let's talk about the issue of incontinence and pelvic floor muscles, because often, and this is when you have conversations with people, but also if you go up on Dr. Google, I know my sources are very credible, right?
Yes, of course.
But there is a suggestion that if you're able to get your pelvic floor muscles right, then you can sort of fix any form of incontinence that you might be dealing with. Is that the case?
No, they're not necessarily. They're definitely pelvic floor muscles are important, not only for the stress incontinence, the coughing and sneezing and wetting yourself, but even for the rushing to the toilet, the urgency, because we know that there's a very vast number of muscles in that in the pelvic area, not just we call it the pelvic floor, but there's lots of other ones that are associated with the bones, some with the spine, that have to be addressed as well. And the point is that we definitely do encourage the bladder strengthening of the muscle down there, but sometimes overworking of the pelvic floor can also cause problems with incontinence. And unfortunately, this is one of the areas where it's sort of counterintuitive, because I love talking about exercise, diet, and that sort of thing. But we know that females who are actually doing impact exercises like jumping and skipping and that sort of thing, and a lot of elite athletes are far more likely to actually develop urine incontinence, because even though the muscles are getting strengthened down there, there are other impacts, like for example the forces when the person is jumping and doing that sort of thing. So although pelvic floor is very important for any type of incontinence, but including even ones where the total incontinence, because often even after we close the holes in the bladder when there's going into the vagina and stuff, there still needs to be strengthening. But it's not the utopia. There are other aspects that need to be addressed, and I think it has to be a more holistic management of every patient with any form of incontinence.
How long does it take often to treat incontinence, and can it be completely eradicated, or is it a case of once those muscles have weakened, you sort of have to live with some level of incontinence indefinitely?
The short answer here is no. You don't have to live with any of these forms of incontinence. Almost all of them can be treated by practitioners. For example, we know that besides the behavioral changes that we're talking about, like in decreasing fluid, for example, if you feel like rushing to the toilet, not drinking too much at night before you go till you don't have these enuresis, these things do help. The pelvic floor exercises are also super important. But for example, when you come to urge incontinence, which is because essentially for the bladder is like a balloon with muscle around it, and what happens is as it gets full, the bladder starts getting a little bit overactive. And the reality, just as a tidbit of fact, that we only urinate actively between 3 and 5 minutes in a 24-hour cycle. Most of the time, your bladder is storing the urine inside there, and we can then treat with medications which can actually relax the bladder muscles. The two main ones are what we call anticholinergics and beta-3 agonists. They often start working within a couple of days, and they do very well. But even if that fails, there's still other things that we can do. For example, we can use Botox, which is the same stuff that we use for facelifts and stuff. It paralyzes muscles. We inject that into the bladder, making them relax. Works very well. There's something called neuromodulation, where we can actually use nerve stimulators to actually control that. And essentially, it can be cured from that. Stress incontinence, particularly both in male and female. In men, it's usually because because we've done operations that have damaged the muscle at the same time. But we can put things like slings and sphincters inside there to help with that. If you've got total incontinence, we're looking at closing the holes and fixing those up. That can be done as well. And the overflow incontinence, again, we can usually de-obstruct the patient to make sure that the overflow doesn't continue. And with the nocturia and bedwetting, again, this chemical ADH, although there are other treatments that are involved, can be supplemented. And often with the enuresis, almost the first time you try it, the patient is basically not having a problem. Although they often do need to be on these treatments, sometimes lifelong, but often they will recover in the future as well. But it is a journey. It's not like an instant sprint. It's a journey that usually has to happen, but almost all of them can be treated.
All right. So the word then is that there is treatment available. So you don't have to necessarily live with incontinence. It does begin, however, with taking the first step and actually going to get help. Professor Mutambira is our guest on the Health and Wellness feature today. I'll be taking your calls for him on 086 000 2032. As you can hear, he's very well versed on the subject, and he might be able to help with whatever questions you may have. You can send some of your text messages and voice notes on 0614 104 107. It's 11:30.
Good morning. With the news headlines, the community of Deep Slot on the north of Joburg has called on the government to put more effort in fighting crime in the area. A family in Kathu in the Northern Cape says it is devastated after 6 of its relatives burned to death in their home at the weekend. And Israel says its troops have entered the center of the southern city of Khan Yunis. Fighting is said to be the most intense there since Israel's ground offensive began. I'll be back with a full news update at midday.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
We continue leading the conversation on SAFM. Let me head over to Durban. Scully, good morning.
Good morning to you, Cathy. Thank
Yes.
you for taking my call. And to the doctor, good morning, sir. Hello?
Good morning, Scully. Morning.
Okay. My ask is, doc, they put me on Euromax, the urologist, yeah? And I was taking the Euromax as usual, one a day. And then just for some reasons on my own, I slowly, and it's gone about, make it a year now or 9 months. I'm not taking the Euromax, but I go normal, But I get like afraid now and then to say, hey, I got to go back and check the doc and so on.
Don't be afraid of your practitioner, Scully. We're very open, and so we must remember that you are the boss when it comes to patients. So you make the call. If you're not using the medication or you're not comfortable with it, definitely go and have a word with him. Now, just for the listeners out there, what he's talking about is as the men have something called a prostate, which is sitting just below the bladder, all the way around the pipe for passing urine. What it does is when we have intercourse and ejaculate or whatever, then it produces most of what a guy ejaculates with another gland called the seminal vesicle. After the age of about 40, it starts getting bigger just for every guy for reasons we're not too sure. And what we usually do when it starts doing that, it can actually start blocking the pipe. And it can also then cause you to have a problem with incontinence as well. So what Scully is on was what we call an alpha blocker, which is basically a medication which relaxes the muscles of the prostate. And often when you use it for a period, it can stop the problem for a period. And then eventually your body sometimes the prostate shrinks a little bit for whatever reason. You don't need to take the medication. So I think the good answer is don't be stressing if you're not taking the medication. But what you should be doing is that just go back just to check, because again, a little about that the commonest cancers in men after skin cancer is prostate cancer, and we do need to check that about once a year. But don't be frightened to go and see your treating physician, which is quite common that some of the medications will be stopped after a period of time.
Thank you, Doc.
All right, Scully, thanks for that. Anonymous says, I'm a senior male, no chronic, only gout and frequent constipation. I did a PSA test in February 23 and the result was negative. I think it was 1.25. But about a month ago, I noticed that at times when I pass water, there's a bit left over, so I have to stand for a while in the loo rather than repeating the process. I don't wake up often though to pass water. Could constipation and rectal inflammation cause prostate issues? And he also mentions that he's been diagnosed with idiopathic hematuria for 3 years. For 3 years plus. Yes, and with microscopic blood, but it has since gone away.
Yes. All of them are basically related. It's true. The rectum is right next door to the prostate and to the bladder. So if you have constipation or irritable bowel syndrome or colitis or any of these things, it can actually irritate the bladder both in men and women and cause you to have a problem. So it is related, but it's not the major issue when it comes to what you're basically saying is that post-void dribbling, where you dribble after you urinate, you don't empty completely. And that's almost always due to the prostate in men over the age of 40. The short answer for Anonymous is that if he's having this problem and it's bothering him, then he should go and see his urologist. For our purposes, there are two things that happen to the prostate after the age of 40. One is cancer, which 1 in 6 guys will get, but the far more common is what we call BPH, or benign prostatic hyperplasia, which is a normal enlargement as we get older. And this can cause a lot of difficulty passing urine. In fact, prostate cancer rarely causes you difficulty passing urine until it's very advanced. That's why we want to do the blood test, the PSA or prostate specific antigen, just to pick it up early so we don't have a problem. But for his purposes, Anonymous, you should be going to see your healthcare provider. And by the way, this is not just in private. Government services, we are very good at. We also can treat all of these things. We have these medications. And he needs to get probably onto one of these medications that Scully was on that will prevent them from having that problem.
All right, and we have more questions that are really around the same question, around internal hemorrhoids and how they affect and how those affect the prostate. But I think you've answered the question. Anything else you want to add on that issue before I move on to other listeners?
Oh yeah, I think the hemorrhoids, which are or piles, which are very common. They're basically essentially the anus is a circular muscle. It's got 3 veins which are going through there, and if you have constipation or you have some other problems, it can actually cause clots in those veins, which then cause a reflex pain and that sort of thing. And they're extremely common, but just remember, if you do have, they usually present with pain, constipation, but they can also present with anal bleeding and sometimes even fecal incontinence. But if you have them, you have to make sure it is piles and not something else, because there are things like cancers of the rectum and things can also cause a similar problem. So it is important for you to see your treating physician. They can usually pick it up, but they're all related. And I think I forgot to mention about the blood in the urine. His blood in the urine for Anonymous was probably because of his prostate. But in general, if you see visible blood in the urine, you can see it with your eyes. You must be worried that up to 30% of you might have a problem with some form of cancer, be it bladder or kidney or something. So don't take it lightly, get it checked out. But if it's not being seen on with your eyes and you're just seeing it, you're just picking it up with tests like these little sticks that we put in our urine, most of the time that's not a big problem, but sometimes we do need to investigate a bit further.
All right, that's really good advice there, Prof. Mutambira. Rachel, you're out in Gqeberha. Good morning, Rachel.
Hi there, Cathy. I hope you're well.
I'm well.
Hi, thanks for the great show, and to the Prof. I do also, I have been to the gynae. It's, I think, a common one in women over 50, urinary incontinence. She did say to me that I do need to make that exercise, you stand, or especially when you're standing, because the muscles tend to become weaker here, Prof. So she says that I need to just press, push in, and I need to make it a habit, but you forget, to do it, and Yeah,
It's true. It's true. Yeah, I suspect you're talking about the one when you cough and sneeze and you wet yourself. That's the problem you've got, right?
like you tend to leak, especially when you laugh out. Like I laugh a lot. So, and also when you like, and when you do go to the loo, like you tend to, like you said, like earlier on, there's like still like you're sitting and you like there's still some like and you even open a tap just so that you can hear the sound of water coming through the tap in order for the urine to come through and that type of thing. But besides the exercise that is good, I suppose, because to strengthen the muscle, there is other exercises that one can do in order to strengthen what do you call that muscle here in between your
pelvic diaphragm? Pelvic diaphragm. That's
Okay.
right. Yeah, no, I think the point is what you're talking about are Kegel exercises where you put weights inside the vagina to help to strengthen the muscles there. They are very helpful as well. But remember, again, there's other things that are involved. For example, particularly if you're going into menopause, part of the control of the urine in the pelvic diaphragm is also hormonal as well. So sometimes hormonal replacement, even vaginal, can help with that to strengthen those muscles and do that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, the commonest things that we do, if you're having a big problem, because the majority of people are not going to get total continence from doing just the exercises, we usually will then consider doing a procedure. And the procedures aren't huge, but the point is that because even that feeling that you're not emptying is because you probably have something called a cystocele, which is your bladder falling into the vagina. And so when you're sitting down, it doesn't empty so well, and because there's still some residual urine there. And what we usually do are procedures where we try to elevate the pelvic diaphragm. The commonest are things called slings. Basically, they're like tapes which we put. It's a day case. It's not even that difficult or that well. It's not. Let me not say difficult, but it's not that not a big operation. And then we elevate that, and after that, that usually works for the majority of people. But there are other things, like for example, when we go into the abdomen and we can pull up the whole of the vagina and pull up the bladder. Again, not massive operations, but are operations. But again, just doing the behavioral therapies and the Kegel weights often is not enough for most patients, and we probably need to consider being referred to your urogynecologist or your urologist for them to discuss about these relatively minor procedures.
All right. Rachel, all the best, hey? Thanks for that, Prof. Joseph, you're out on the road. I'm going to ask you to keep it short for me. We literally have a minute and a half left. Good morning.
Hi, Cathy.
Yes,
yes,
Joseph?
Cathy?
Yes, go for it.
Sorry, man. I was looking for you yesterday. You know what's happening? My mom is almost 2 months at the hospital. The problem is high blood, shooter, and then you know what's happening? The doctor then we went there with my sister. They didn't know about it. Sister, no. Discharge for 2 months. Ne wa ka o ntse le mo ko Val Hospital ke batla go ntse ke fane ka number tsa ka maobane ba re ke phone is late because network e sama en lahlela ke driver lori 2 months my mom is in the hospital na sa hantle ba mo tlammele matsogo ba usiwa ba mo hlaba ba mo change sa ka doctor e mo discharge o na le soba le le holo ka mo morao we bitang tso
all right
for 2 months o la ka tlapisi o na sa change
okay Joseph, I think what I'm going to do, Prof, Joseph's matter sounds like it needs a further interrogation and assessment. I know that our time is almost up. We're going to get cut off by the link now. Let me thank you so much for being part of this conversation. We really appreciate your time.
No, thank you for the opportunity. And again, thanks for a great show.
Sure, thank you, Prof. Shingai Mutambira. So what we'll do is that we'll call Joseph back and attend to the matter of his mom in hospital for 2 months, but he seemingly has a lot of issues to raise around the kind of care she's been receiving in hospital out in the Vaal. That's where we leave it for the show on this Wednesday morning. We're back with you again tomorrow. Up next is the book reading.
Get
ready for an adventure of a lifetime with SABC TV Licenses Ultimate Competition. Feel the pulse-pounding excitement of a Bundesliga match live on an all-expenses-paid journey you'll never forget. Or embrace the rhythm of your dreams at the Coachella Music Festival. The choice is yours. A football fan's paradise or a music lover's haven. Simply pay your TV license, then head to www.winnerholidayWithSABCTVLicenses.co.za for a chance to win big. And don't forget, there are incredible weekly prizes up for grabs too. TV licenses. Pay yours. Make a difference.
Various African outfits will display a great brand of cricket this festive season. Kenya, Ghana and Cameroon will play their hearts out in the East-West qualifier of the BNP Group Africa Cup T20 2023. They will all endeavour to clinch one of 4 remaining spots. This is the journey to the finals of the BNP Group Africa Cup T20 2023. Witness the thrilling action from 5 to 10 December, live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
It's the celebration of the century, and you're invited. We've already given away almost 3 million rand with 56 daily vouchers won. Buy a new Ford before 31 December and you could win a 50,000 rand voucher or the grand prize of us paying for your new Ford. Visit your nearest Ford dealer today. TNCs apply.
Individual brilliance always adds a superb vibe to the team. Sami Sohail of Malawi holds the highest batting average in 2020 internationals. Dhruv Maisuriya of Botswana is the quickest to reach 50 wickets in 2020 internationals, and Francisco Kouana of Mozambique is the first player to score a century and take 5 wickets in the same 2020 internationals. Catch these African stars in action of the BNP Group Africa Cup this December, live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide.
The book reading. Please note the views expressed in this book are not that of the station. Listeners' discretion is advised. SFM presents another episode of Simply Larry, read by Simpiwe Nkosi, written by Elias Masilela.
Chapter 16. Saved by Latin. Prince Edward. Throughout my life, I have picked what I call silent mentors from the people around me. Father MacDonald is one of these. It was interesting to look back in time on each of these and to see how they each have influenced and continue to influence me, directly and indirectly. In my primary school, it definitely was Father Fleming. He gave me the foundation for what I know and do today. What was significant in this relationship is that he followed me to high school, which meant his influence straddled the 2 levels. Whilst Father Fleming was present in my high school, Father Larry predominated. This is simply because Father Fleming only influenced my life in the classroom, whilst Larry influenced it both inside and outside, and way beyond my stay at Salesian. There is no doubt that among all the mentors, he had the longest and probably the deepest influence on my socialization. Going to university did not cut the umbilical cord with Salesian and Larry. But I needed unique mentors for that environment. Here, I identified Dr. Xolile P. Guma, also widely known as XP, and a former deputy governor of the South African Reserve Bank, SARB, as well as Professor Michael Mike S. Matsebula. These two would be essential, not only in sharpening my academic and research skills, but also in preparing me for the place of work. I owe my professional success primarily to them. In particular, gratitude goes to Mike, who influenced my first job and active participation in the economics profession. On the other hand, XP influenced my early decision to study economics as one of my majors for my first degree. These two certainly prepared me for my first exposure to the professional world. In my first job at the Central Bank of Swaziland, CBS, my mentors were Mr. H.B.B. Oliver, governor at the time, and Mrs. Sibongile G. Mdluli, head of research at the time. In my second job at the South African National Treasury, NT, my mentor was Minister Trevor Manuel. I had two conduits to Trevor, without whom I would not have had this splendid exposure. These are Lisicha Khanyago and Maria Ramos. In my third job at Sanlam, my mentors were Mr. Themba Kametse and Mr. Johan van Zyl, the group CEO at the time. Each of these were trailblazers in their areas of expertise or responsibility. They continue to be prominent today. Ironically, I cannot extend the above pattern to my stint at the Public Investment Corporation, PIC. Here, I could not find a person that I could see as a mentor. I could not discern a particular reason for this outcome. I deferred to psychologists to offer an answer. Instead, I was pleasantly reminded, over a drink, that I instead subconsciously picked a mentee in Matshepo More, who was the CFO at the time of writing the book. Despite not being conscious of identifying her, I am fully alive to the mutual influence we have had on each other. This all began when I identified talent in her as a young professional. "You took a risk on me," as she puts it. She became the youngest CFO in the more than 100-year history of the organization. This is a very significant role in the history of the country and continent. The most recent influence she had on my thinking came on 4 January 2018, when I told her about Larry and the uniqueness of the PIC in this regard. With her usual sharpness of mind, she responded by saying, "You may not have identified a mentor, but you certainly identified a mentee in me. You taught me the value of principle, which has seen me well through many decisions." This opened my mind and directly influenced the opening of this chapter. If I relax the criteria I used for this analysis, this result of the period at the PIC may not be entirely accurate. A person that fitted this mentor role is Professor Michael Katz. He just happened to be an outsider, but hugely instrumental. Each of these individuals were identified on the basis of their instrumentalist effect on me and in their respective areas of influence. With some, their influence was transitional, whilst with others, it has proven to be permanent. Larry belongs to the latter category. He still influences my thinking and conscience to this day. There are many memorable anecdotes that keep these lessons alive in my mind. One of these is the visit by Prince Edward to Swaziland and the school. This is one visit that Larry remembers instantly, presumably because it involves royalty. This was the visit of Prince Edward in connection with the Prince Makosini Award. It came from Prince Charles. "We are still running the damn thing. It still exists." That is when Prince Edward came here. He came to represent that. When asked about his memory of the event and the series of activities, his theory of authority swiftly came back with added vigor. "I go back to my notion of royalty and my disdain of the people who are at the top of the so-called pile. They are all terribly ordinary to me. Actually, I had the encounter with Prince Edward because he wanted to speak to the students at the university. I was, and still am at the university, as the chaplain. He came in late, and there was all the usual flurry. I was standing at the door of the church. When he came up, he stopped and started talking to me. Eventually, someone came out to rudely drag him away, saying, "Your Royal Highness, you're supposed to be inside," whilst he was talking to me. He planted the trees at the study centre. They are still there and are growing fine. I had encounters with members of the royal family, but not the immediate, the fringe group, because of Sister Judith. Judith is in that business, and I'm not. She's the very opposite to me. Sister Judith Ellen of St. Michael's High School is passionately known to us simply as Sister J.E. What stood out for me then, and remains vivid today, was how irritated and intolerant Larry was by the level of detail and autocracy in the preparation for the visit, as well as with the protocol and security personnel. But he maturely kept it to himself. Every step and every centimetre had to be rehearsed at least a dozen times. Every time the security people came back to consult, they would ask exactly the same questions